Alright, S1, let's have a look at block 13, talking about our orthographic. So, block 13 is special. Block 13 has a sloping side marked here in orange, and I'll explain why I've marked it in orange in a second. You should be able to see that this is block 13. It's just got this triangular cut section causing this slope. So what we need to think about is what will we see looking at our front elevation, our end elevations, and our plan with this sloping side. So our front elevation, here it is here. If we were to look directly at the 2D view, looking at the front, we are just going to see a rectangle with two triangles either side here. You'll be able to see that dark edge line that cuts through. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. This sloping side you are able to see from both the plan above and the end elevation to the side. So the reason it's orange is because if you added pink and yellow together, it creates orange. So you can see this sloping side from both above and to the side. So let's have a look at the top view. Here it is, here's your plan view. It just looks like a rectangle. Remember, if you look at a slope in 2D, you don't know it's a slope because you can't see the depth of the slope or the angles or anything that might give you clues that it is a sloping side. It's just going to look like a rectangle. So once again, we go back to our isometric view. Here we are. Now we look at our end elevation. Again, you can see the sloping face as well as the flat face to the end elevation. So when we're dealing with sloping faces, it means that you can see that face on more than one viewpoint. So you need to be careful and think about what it is that you might see
Okay, so
from
now we've had a
your
look at the
drawings.
block
So
on
let's get
Inventor and we
started
can
looking at
visualise it
our
in a 3D space.
orthographic
Let's get
drawings
started
for
on
this view.
drawing that and representing it in an orthographic. So, as always, couple of reminders. Our block itself, each square is represented of 10mm, which is 1cm on your ruler. And then we are going to make sure all our views align up correctly, and we're going to start by putting 10mm up from the bottom of the page on both sides to create our ground line, and on that ground line is going to be where our elevations both sit, both front and end elevation, making sure they are nice and parallel to each other. So then we can go 10mm in from the edge up the top here, and then 10mm in from the edge of the top of our page, just to give us that nice tight right angle on this side, where we will then draw in our end elevation, or our front elevation I should say, sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 blocks along gives us 80mm. It's always the same width for all these blocks, so that is 80. And then how tall is our block? Our block is 6 squares tall, so that is 60mm. So we're going to put that 60 mark there. With our height for the 60mm mark, I'm also going to put that on the edge of the page on the other side, and the reason for that being is that I can then take my height from one side directly across to the other to get a nice straight line that should be parallel to our ground line. And then the width of our front elevation is 80, so I'll put that mark on up the top here as well, which means that these two lines should now nicely connect to give me a parallel line running down my drawing. So in that square face there, or a rectangle, is going to be our front elevation. All we've done is we've come up our height, we'll come along our width. Because block 13 is relatively simple, it's just a rectangle with a little triangle section cut off of it. When you look at the block itself, you know that that triangle section starts directly up at that top edge. You can see it there, right in the top corner of that square, and then the bottom corner of the opposite bottom square. That means that to draw that in, all you need to do is to connect corner to corner, because that is the correct distance for that line. and then you can add in your outline for your front elevation. So let's just do that now. Let's darken in those lines. Okay, so our front elevation is basically going to be a rectangle split to look like two triangles. Awesome, so that is our front elevation. Okay, we can see those two triangle faces there, marked in green. There they are, they're represented on our front elevation. So, next, let's look at our plan view. So again, we're going to come up 10mm above our front elevation, leaving ourselves that little gap, and this is going to be our ground line to our plan view. Okay, so we're just going to take end to end there, nice and straight, parallel, perfect. So, remember our plan view is looking directly down upon our block. The total depth of our block going back is 4 squares, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 squares of a distance, so that means that 40mm is our total depth, so let's mark that on both sides of the plan view here so that we can draw that parallel line coming across. Okay, now for this block we know that looking directly down, this section here doesn't change, so there's a small rectangle section. There's 2 squares in terms of the depth, which is 20mm from the back wall, because we're drawing looking at this front. So where this cut section appears, we are then just going to mark in 20mm, so half a depth there, half a depth there, and then connect those 2 lines. Okay, and that gives us all the lines that we need for our plan view, because we know that if we were to look directly down on this sloping face, we will just see a rectangle from above and from that side as well. So that is effectively our plan view complete. The sloping side, as was shown earlier, is just going to look like a rectangle from a 2D perspective, because you can't tell it's sloped when it's 2D. Only when it's 3D you can tell that there's a sloped surface. Excellent. So, time then to finish off our end elevation. Let me just mark in there, that is our plan. So, time to finish off our end elevation. Once again, leave yourself a 10mm gap. Leave yourself the 10mm gap. And then connect those 2 lines, so we'll get that nice and parallel. Again, we're looking for the depth because we're looking on this side, so how far back does it go? It's 4 squares, 40mm. So 4 squares, 40mm up top, 40mm on the bottom, so that we can connect those 2 lines to get nice parallel edges. Okay, and what we're going to see if we look directly at this end elevation, looking in this zone here, is we are going to see one solid flat rectangle, and we're going to see this sloping face, which again, because we're looking from a 2D perspective, is just going to look like a flat rectangle also. So we know from previous that the slope on the flat side is 20mm in, it's half the depth. 20mm, 20mm. Connect those 2 lines. Connect those 2 lines. And then darken in all our parts. And that is our end elevation. Super simple when we're looking at slopes. Okay, you just need to remember that because you are looking from your 2D perspective, that the slope itself won't be a slope, it's just going to be a flat surface. Okay, and then plan, end elevation. Excellent. So have a go at tackling the questions that have been set out in your PowerPoint. Best of luck, and if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask your class teacher. Speak to you soon, S1.